June 26, 1943. 14:27 hours. 27,000 feet above Lyon, France. Dalton Mackenzie couldn't see. His windscreen was black with oil, thick as tar, coating the glass in spreading darkness. The P-47 Thunderbolt shuddered around him like a dying animal, metal screaming hydraulic fluid, spraying red mist through the shattered canopy. He could taste it. Metallic, chemical, mixed with his own blood. 218 bullet holes. He didn't know the count yet. Wouldn't know until the crew chief stopped counting 3 hours later, gave up, and just shook his head in disbelief. But Dalton knew he was dying. The canopy was jammed. 20mm cannon shell had exploded in the track, welding it shut. He'd tried the release 4 times, pulled until his shoulder screamed. Nothing. He was trapped at 5 miles above the earth in 7 tons of aluminum that was supposed to be in 1,000 burning pieces by now. 87 miles to England. 23 minutes of fuel remaining if the leak didn't get worse. The math was simple. The math was impossible. Then he saw it. A shadow, pulling alongside. The Focke-Wulf 190, same one that had been killing him. The German pilot pulled canopy to canopy close enough that Dalton could see his eyes. Young, blonde, 21, maybe 22 years old. The expression on his face wasn't triumph, wasn't hatred, it was fear. The German pilot stared at the wreckage that should not be flying. He shook his head slowly. Once, twice. Then he did something Dalton would remember for 58 years. He saluted. Not the stiff Nazi salute. An informal gesture, hand to forehead, respect between warriors. The Focke-Wulf peeled away, wing over, gone. Dalton was alone with the dying aircraft and 87 miles of enemy territory. Time to tell the story of how he got here. 8 months earlier. April 8th, 1943. Same sky, different world. Oberlieutenant Victor von Steinhoff adjusted his oxygen mask and smiled. The sight through his canopy was too absurd. 16 shapes climbing laboriously through the crystal air at 23,000 feet. Fat, ungainly, like flying milk bottles with wings too small and engines too big. The new American fighters making their combat debut over occupied Europe. Victor had 47 kills. Poland, France, Britain, Russia. 4 years of continuous combat had taught him to evaluate an aircraft in seconds. These were targets pretending to be threats. Milchflaschen, he transmitted to his wingman, Dieter Vogel. Flying milk bottles, unable to suppress the laughter. Dieter, 22 years old and still believing war was glorious, laughed with him. They sent us comedy, Herr Oberlieutenant. Below them, 16 P-47C, Thunderbolts of the 335th Fighter Squadron, lumbered upward in tight formation. Each aircraft weighed 7 tons fully loaded. Their Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines, 18 cylinders producing 2,000 horsepower, strained against gravity and mass. What Victor didn't know, what none of the 16 Focke-Wulf pilots circling above could have imagined, was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon that would systematically destroy German air superiority. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transform from objects of derision into instruments of annihilation. But on April 8, 1943, they were just targets. Victor checked his formation. 16 Focke-Wulf 190A5S from Jagdgeschwader 26, the Abbeville Boys, the most experienced fighter unit in occupied France. Positions for attack, he transmitted, from above. Standard Schwarm tactics. Make it educational. Victor rolled inverted and dove. Inside the lead P-47, Major Collier Ashford saw them coming. Ashford was 28 years old, former Eagle Squadron. He'd flown Spitfires with the RAF for 18 months before transferring to the American Army Air Force. 6 kills to his credit. Bandits 11 o'clock high, 16 plus. Focke-Wulf 190s, they're coming down. His voice was calm, conversational. Behind him, 15 pilots reacted differently. In the number 4 position, flying tail end, Charlie, 24-year-old Dalton Mackenzie, felt his stomach drop. First combat mission, 400 hours of training, 0 combat experience. The Focke-Wulfs came down like hammers. Brake right on my mark. Use your dive speed. Don't try to turn with them. Dalton's hands were sweating inside his leather gloves. Everything was happening too fast. The lead Focke-Wulf opened fire at 800 yards. Brake right. The P-47 formation scattered. Dalton hauled the stick right. The 7-ton fighter responded like a freight train trying to avoid a collision. Slow, ponderous. the turn radius wide enough to fly a bomber through. The Focke-Wulf half the weight turned inside him effortlessly. Dalton saw it happen to Lieutenant Whittaker Beaumont. Whit was 19 years old, son of a Georgia plantation owner. His drawl was so thick that pilots from New York couldn't understand him half the time. The Focke-Wulf got on Whit's tail and stayed there. Cannon fire stitched across the P-47's right wing. The wing shredded, hydraulic fluid sprayed, the aircraft snap-rolled left out of control. Dalton watched Whit's canopy blow away, watched the young Georgian bail out at 21,000 feet. The parachute blossomed white against the blue. Whit would spend the rest of the war in Stalag Luft 3. Dalton didn't have time to think about it because a Focke-Wulf was on him now. He could see the pilot's head behind the armored glass. He slammed the throttle forward. Water injection. Emergency power. The P-47 accelerated. Not enough. The Focke-Wulf matched him, turned inside him, got closer. Dalton's entire body tensed, waiting for the impact of 20mm shells that would tear his aircraft apart. They never came. The Germans' guns jammed, 4 cannon, all 4 jammed simultaneously. A mechanical failure so unlikely that Dalton wouldn't believe it when he reported it. The Focke-Wulf broke off, heading back to base. Dalton was alive, not because he'd outflown the German, not because the P-47 was superior, because of pure, stupid, impossible luck, the kind of luck that doesn't last. The dogfight lasted 7 minutes. When it ended, 3 P-47s were shot down. Whit Beaumont captured. Lieutenant Gideon Fisher dead in the wreckage near Reims. Lieutenant Paul Zimmermann dead in the channel never found. 0 German losses. The formation returned to base at West Hampnet at 16:45 hours. 12 aircraft. 3 empty spaces on the flight line. Dalton climbed out of his cockpit legs, shaking, and vomited on the tarmac beside his right main gear. That night in the enlisted men's club, the British pilots made their opinions clear. A RAF squadron leader stood at the bar with a pint of bitter and watched the American pilots drink in silence. "I hear you boys had a rough go today," he said. His accent was Eton. His condescension was universal. Nobody answered. Might I suggest that the P-47 is perhaps not ideally suited for fighter operations in the European theatre? Captain Garrett Donnelly, 32 years old, former cargo pilot, built like a brick wall with an Irish temper, set down his whiskey very carefully. "We lost 3 men today. You want to make jokes about it, you step outside and we'll discuss it properly." The squadron leader had the good sense to shut up, but he wasn't wrong. In the corner of the club, nursing a Coca-Cola because he didn't drink, Dalton listened to the older pilots discuss the day's disaster. "We're flying the wrong aircraft," someone said. "We're flying it wrong," said another voice. That was Major Collier Ashford. He sat alone at a small table, still in his flight suit, studying a notebook filled with calculations. Dalton walked over. "Sir." Ashford looked up. His eyes were grey, tired, but sharp. "Mackenzie, you're alive. Good. Sit down." Dalton sat. Ashford tapped his notebook. "The P-47 weighs 7 tons. The Focke-Wulf weighs 4. We can't outturn them. Basic physics." "Yes, sir." "But in a dive mass becomes an advantage. The P-47 can reach 550 miles per hour. The Focke-Wulf can't exceed 450. That's a 100 mile per hour speed advantage." Dalton studied the diagram. "So we climb high, dive fast, hit them and keep going." "Exactly. Boom and zoom. We use altitude speed and these." Ashford pointed at his P-47 through the window. 8 50 caliber machine guns. 3,400 rounds of ammunition. When all 8 guns converge on target, we put 100 rounds per second into a 6-foot circle. Nothing survives that. "The Germans will adapt," Dalton said. "They will, and we'll have to be smarter." Ashford closed his notebook. "Tomorrow we try it my way. You'll fly my wing. Think you can follow orders?" "Yes, sir." "Good, because the old way gets you killed. The new way might just work." Dalton didn't sleep that night. He lay in his bunk in the Quonset hut and stared at the curved metal ceiling. Outside, the English rain drummed on the roof. Steady, relentless. He thought about Whit Beaumont floating down under a white parachute, about Gideon Fisher, who'd been married 3 months. He thought about Sarah. They'd met at the county fair in Oklahoma, summer of 1941. She was a schoolteacher, 20 years old then, dark hair, smart in a way that made him nervous. They'd ridden the Ferris wheel, and she'd held his hand at the top while they looked out over the farmland stretching to the horizon. "What are you thinking about?" she'd asked. "That I never want to leave this," he'd said. 4 months later, Pearl Harbor happened and he enlisted the next day. Now he was 5,000 miles from that Ferris wheel flying an aircraft that seemed designed to get him killed. He pulled her latest letter from his pocket, read it by flashlight under the blanket. "My dearest Dalton,
I'm teaching the children about geography now. I showed them where England is on the map. They asked if I knew anyone there. I said yes. The bravest man I've ever met. They asked what makes him brave. I said he gets scared but goes anyway. That's the definition, I think. Come home to our farm, my dearest. I'll be waiting. He folded the letter carefully, put it back in the pocket over his heart. Tomorrow he'd fly again. Tomorrow he'd try Ashford's tactics. Tomorrow he'd either prove the P-47 could fight, or he'd join Whitten Gideon in the statistics column. 200 yards away in the maintenance hangar, Thaddeus Brennan worked under harsh electric lights. Tad was 24 years old. Mechanical genius. The kind of man who could hear an engine miss from 50 yards away and diagnose the problem by sound alone. He stood in front of Lieutenant Gideon Fisher's P-47, the one that had almost made it home. 27 cannon holes, 114 machine gun strikes. The entire left side of the fuselage looked like a cheese grater. The vertical stabilizer was mostly missing. 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural backbone of the aircraft, were shot through. It had flown 87 miles. Tad ran his hand along the damaged aluminum, felt the jagged edges of the holes. A Spitfire with this damage would have disintegrated. A Messerschmitt would have burned. The P-47 flew home. "You ugly bastard," Tad said to the aircraft. Affectionate, respectful. "You beautiful ugly bastard." The crew chief sergeant Patrick O'Malley walked over, 40 years old, Irish, career military. "Can we save it?" Patrick asked. Tad nodded. "We can save it. 3 weeks, maybe 4. But yeah. Worth saving." Tad looked at the damaged aircraft, at the armor plate behind the pilot's seat, dented but not penetrated, at the R-2800 engine, hit 7 times, still running when it landed. "This thing just proved something," Tad said. "I don't know what yet, but yeah, it's worth saving." They worked through the night. By dawn, they had the damaged sections documented, the repair plan drafted, the parts requisition filed. The P-47 would fly again. The question was whether its pilots would learn to fly it right before they all got killed. April became May. May became early June. The statistics were brutal. 14 P-47s lost in the first month of operations. 3 confirmed German kills. The loss ratio was catastrophic. But something was changing. The pilots who survived learned, adapted, stopped trying to dogfight, started using Ashford's tactics. Climb high, dive fast, hit hard, don't stay to fight. Dalton flew his 10th mission on May 30th, his 20th on June 15th. Each time he came back. Each time he learned something new. He learned that the P-47 could take punishment that would destroy any other aircraft. He watched Captain Donnelly limp home with 43 bullet holes and a dead engine land gear up on the grass beside the runway walk away without a scratch. He learned that the 850 caliber machine guns, when all firing together, created a cone of destruction that nothing could survive. He saw a Messerschmitt 110 literally come apart in mid-air when all 8 guns converged. He learned that above 25,000 feet, the P-47's turbo-supercharged engine gave it an advantage no German fighter could match. Most importantly, he learned that survival wasn't about being the best pilot. It was about being smart enough to use the aircraft's strengths and avoid its weaknesses. He got his first kill on June 12th. A Messerschmitt 109 that made the mistake of trying to climb away. Dalton had dived from 28,000 feet, built speed to 480 miles per hour, pulled up beneath the German fighter, and fired a 3-second burst. The Messerschmitt's left wing separated from the fuselage. The aircraft rolled inverted and fell. Dalton watched it go down. Felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just relief that he'd done his job and survived. That evening, Ashford promoted him to element leader. 4 aircraft under his command. "You're learning," Ashford said. "Now, teach the new guys. Your ancient wisdom now, Mackenzie. All of 24 years old." Dalton laughed. It felt strange. He hadn't laughed in weeks, but the laughter wouldn't last. June 26th was coming. The mission briefing on June 26, 1943 was routine. Escort duty. 3 squadrons combined, the 335th, 62nd and 63rd, would put up 48 serviceable P-47s to accompany B-17 bombers to a target near Laon, France. Dalton checked his aircraft that morning at 500 hours. Patrick O'Malley had worked all night. "She's perfect," Patrick said. "Engines tuned, guns bore-sighted, full ammunition load, full fuel." "Thanks, Sarge. Bring her home in one piece, Lieutenant. I spent 6 hours on that engine." "I'll do my best." Dalton climbed into the cockpit at 0545. Strapped in, 5-point harness, parachute, Mae West life preserver, radio lead, oxygen mask.
The routine was comforting. He pulled Sarah's letter from his jacket pocket, didn't read it, just touched it, felt the paper, put it in his chest pocket over his heart. The R2800 engine coughed to life at 6 o'clock. 18 cylinders firing in sequence. The whole aircraft vibrated with contained violence. They took off at 6:15. 48 aircraft in formation. The dawn was clear. Perfect visibility. They climbed to 27,000 feet over the channel. The formation was tight, professional. Dalton flew tail-end Charlie, last aircraft in the formation, the most vulnerable position. The bombers hit their target at 1300 hours. Flak filled the sky. Black puffs of explosive death. The bombers flew through it steady, dropping their bombs, turning for home. The German fighters arrived at 13:15. 16. Focke-Wulf 190s from Jagdgeschwader 26, diving from 30,000 feet, out of the sun, led by Hauptmann Wilhelm Steiner, 28 years old, 43 kills, brother of a famous ace, ambitious, skilled, ruthless. Wilhelm had studied the American tactics, knew they liked to dive, so he adapted. He attacked from directly above. Vertical dive, too fast for the Americans to counter-dive. The tail-end aircraft never had a chance. Dalton saw them coming 1 second before impact. Pulled hard right. Too late. The crossfire hit him from 3 directions simultaneously. The first 20mm cannon shell exploded against the engine cowling. The cowling tore away. Fragments peppered the windscreen. The second shell hit the canopy track. The canopy shattered. Glass and plexiglass fragments filled the cockpit like a blizzard. Dalton felt impacts across his face. Warm blood ran down his cheek. The third and fourth shells hit the right wing. Hydraulic fluid sprayed. The pressure gauge dropped to 0 in 2 seconds. Machine gun fire walked up the fuselage. 13mm armor-piercing rounds punched through the aluminum skin like paper. One round hit Dalton's left leg just above the knee, punched through the muscle, exited the back of his thigh. He didn't feel it immediately. Just a punch. Then the burning started. The P-47 rolled left, out of control. The engine screamed. Fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Smoke filled the cockpit. Dalton pulled the canopy release. Nothing. Pulled again. Harder. The canopy was jammed. The 20mm shell in the track had welded it shut. He was trapped. At 27,000 feet. In an aircraft that was supposed to be dying. That should have been falling in pieces, but wasn't. The P-47 was still flying. Dalton stopped pulling at the jammed canopy. Stopped because panic was death. He forced himself to breathe. The oxygen mask was still working. His face was wet. Blood from the glass cuts mixed with hydraulic fluid. Everything smelled like burning insulation and hot metal. The aircraft was shaking itself apart. The engine note had changed from a roar to a scream. The oil pressure gauge showed 22 pounds per square inch. Should be 75. Dropping fast. Dalton leveled the wings through muscle memory and training. The stick fought him. No hydraulics meant no power assist. Just cables and pulleys and his own strength against 7 tons of dying aircraft. The windscreen was coated in oil. Black. Thick. He couldn't see forward, could only see through the side panels of the shattered canopy. Airspeed 170 miles per hour, barely above stall speed, altitude 26,800 feet, descending slowly despite full power, heading 273 degrees, west, toward England, toward home, distance to English coast 87 miles. He did the math. Had to. Numbers were real. Fuel remaining 128 gallons. The gauge was dropping faster than normal consumption. Leak somewhere. 3 gallons per minute bleeding away. Time to coast at current speed, 31 minutes. Fuel remaining at 3 gallons per minute loss, 35 gallons. Maybe. It was going to be close. Then he saw the shadow. A Focke-Wulf 190 pulled alongside. Close. 50 feet off his right wing. Lieutenant Otto Brenner was 21 years old. 8 confirmed kills. Before the war, he'd been a student at Leipzig, studying engineering. He'd wanted to build bridges. Instead, he killed people in the sky over France. Otto had watched the American P-47 absorb his entire first attack run, had emptied his 4 20mm cannon into the fat American fighter, 120 rounds of high-explosive incendiary, enough firepower to destroy 3 Spitfires. The P-47 kept flying. Now Otto pulled close to confirm the kill, but the American wasn't falling. The aircraft was a wreck, the entire right side shredded, engine cowling gone, flames licking from inside the nacelle, canopy shattered, but the pilot was still there, hunched over the controls, still flying. Otto couldn't believe it. In 7 months of combat, he'd never seen damage like this on an aircraft that remained airborne. He repositioned. armed his 13mm machine guns. The cannon were empty, but the machine guns still had 300 rounds each. He fired. The machine guns hammered. Tracer rounds walked across the P-47's left wing, across the fuselage, into the engine. He watched the strikes, saw metal tear. The P-47 wallowed, dropped 200 feet. The pilot fought the controls, brought it level again, still flying. Otto emptied both machine guns, 600 rounds total. He was out of ammunition now, completely dry. He pulled alongside again. This time he could see the American pilot's face clearly. Young, bleeding, terrified but still fighting the controls. Otto had been raised Lutheran. His father was a pastor in Leipzig. His mother taught Sunday school. They'd raised him to believe in dignity, in honor, in the idea that even in war some things mattered. This American pilot had earned something. Otto didn't know what. Respect, maybe. Recognition that some men refuse to die even when death is certain. He lifted his hand to his forehead. Not the stiff Nazi salute, an older gesture. Soldier to soldier, man to man. The American saw it. Lifted his own hand in response. Weak, shaking. But there. Otto peeled away, rolled inverted, dove for the deck. He had to get home before his fuel ran out. Behind him, the crippled P-47 limped west. Otto would think about that moment for the rest of his life. Dalton watched the Focke-Wulf disappear. For 30 seconds he felt something like relief. Then reality reasserted itself. The oil pressure gauge read 8 pounds per square inch. The engine was dying. Time remaining before engine failure maybe 10 minutes. Distance to English coast 73 miles. The math had gotten worse. His left leg was throbbing now. The initial shock wearing off the pain arriving in waves, hot, pulsing. He looked down. His flight suit was dark with blood from mid-thigh down. He tried to move the leg. It responded. Barely. Small mercies. The radio was dead. The master caution panel lit up like a Christmas tree. Fire warning, hydraulic failure, electrical failure, fuel pressure fluctuation. Every system screaming that the aircraft should not be flying. But it was. Dalton forced himself to focus. One problem at a time. First navigation. He couldn't see forward. Had to navigate by instruments and peripheral vision. The compass heading was steady at 273 degrees. That would take him across the French coast near Calais, across the Channel to the English coast near Dover. 73 miles. Second fuel. The gauge showed 110 gallons. Still dropping. 3 gallons per minute. That gave him 36 minutes. At 170 miles per hour, he could cover 102 miles in 36 minutes. The math worked. Barely. Third, the engine. The oil pressure was now at 4 pounds per square inch. Falling. The temperature gauge was climbing into the red. 220 degrees Celsius. The engine was cooking itself. He reduced power slightly. The airspeed decreased to 160 miles per hour, but the temperature stabilized. 215 degrees. New math, 73 miles at 160 miles per hour. 27 minutes. Fuel at 3 gallons per minute for 27 minutes, 81 gallons needed. He had 110. It might work. The pain in his leg spiked. He gritted his teeth. The oxygen mask hissed. The world narrowed to instruments and pain and will. He thought about Sarah. Not the letter. The real woman. The way she'd held his hand on the Ferris wheel. The way she'd kissed him goodbye at the train station. "Come home," she'd written. He was trying. God help him, he was trying. At RAF Manston Airfield on the English coast, the control tower had received the emergency transmission before Dalton's radio died. "Mayday, mayday. Red Dog 4. Major damage. Single engine. Hydraulics gone. 1 pilot injured. Attempting return to base." Then, silence. The controller, Flight Lieutenant Thomas Pemberton, had been working air traffic control since 1940. He'd heard a lot of mayday calls. Most ended with a crash site and a body bag. But he cleared the runway anyway. Alerted the crash crew. "Distance to aircraft," he asked the radar operator. "Unknown, sir. We lost transponder signal. If he's who I think he is, he's somewhere over Calais, maybe 60 miles out. Can he make it?" The radar operator, 19 years old from Manchester, looked at the empty scope. "No, sir. Not a chance." Pemberton nodded, picked up the telephone. "We might have an American coming in shot to pieces. Permission to keep the field clear." "How long?" 30 minutes. "Maybe more. Do it." 62 miles from Manston Dalton crossed the French coast at 24,000 feet. The oil pressure gauge read 0. The engine was running on residual oil now, on borrowed time. The temperature gauge was at 235 degrees Celsius. The engine should have seized 5 minutes ago. The fact that it hadn't was a violation of physics and common sense. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 was simply too well built to die easily. Dalton reduced power again. The airspeed dropped to 145 miles per hour, barely above stall speed for a shot-up P-47. The aircraft wallowed through the air like a drunk man walking home. Every control input required both hands on the stick. Below him, the English Channel appeared, grey-green water stretching to the horizon, 22 miles across at the narrowest point. 22 miles of water cold enough to kill in 15 minutes. If he had to ditch, he'd die. Don't think about it. Fly the aircraft. The fuel gauge showed 62 gallons, still dropping. The leak was getting worse. 5 gallons per minute now. 22 miles to go. At 145 miles per hour, 9 minutes. Fuel needed 45 gallons. He had 62. It was going to be close. His vision was starting to grey at the edges. Blood loss. The leg wound had soaked through his flight suit pooled in his boot. He shook his head, forced himself to focus. 8 minutes. 7. The engine coughed, missed a beat. The whole aircraft shuddered. Dalton's heart stopped. The engine caught again. Ran rough for 5 seconds. Smoothed out. Not yet. Please God, not yet. 6 minutes. 5. He could see the English coast now. White cliffs, green fields beyond. The fuel gauge showed 28 gallons. 4 minutes. The engine coughed again. This time it didn't smooth out. It ran rough, missing on 2 cylinders, maybe 3. The aircraft decelerated. 140 miles per hour. 135. 3 minutes. Dalton pushed the nose down slightly, trading altitude for airspeed. He was at 18,000 feet now. He dropped to 16,000 feet, gained back to 145 miles per hour. The English coast was 3 miles ahead. 2 minutes. The engine seized. Not gradually, not with warning. 1 second it was running rough, the next it was a solid block of metal. The propeller stopped rotating, froze in place. The sudden silence was deafening. Dalton had been flying with engine noise for 5 hours. The absence of it was like going deaf. He was gliding now. 7 tons of aircraft with the glide ratio of a brick. He'd lose 1,000 feet per minute, altitude 16,000 feet. Distance to Manston 14 miles. He couldn't make it. The math was simple. Brutal. He'd hit the water 2 miles short of the coast. But there was one thing left to try. The P-47 had 8 50 caliber machine guns in the wings, each gun with its ammunition box. Total ammunition weight 894 pounds. Dead weight now. Dalton reached for the master armament panel, flipped the cover. Hit the emergency jettison for all 8 guns. The guns dropped away. 894 pounds of weight gone in an instant. The aircraft's descent rate decreased. 900 feet per minute, 850. Not enough. He jettisoned the ammunition boxes. The belts of 50 caliber rounds spooled out, fell away. Another 894 pounds gone. Descent rate 700 feet per minute. Better. Still not enough. Altitude 14,000 feet. Distance 12 miles. Time to impact 20 minutes at current descent rate. Distance covered in 20 minutes at 145 miles per hour, 48 miles. He'd make the coast. Barely. But Manston was 10 miles inland. He'd hit somewhere in Kent. The radio crackled to life. Weak. Barely functional. Aircraft transmitting in the blind. This is Manston Tower. We have you on visual. You are cleared for emergency landing. Runway 28. Crash equipment standing by. Dalton keyed the transmit button. Nothing. Dead. He tried again. A burst of static then. Manston. Red Dog 4. No power. No hydraulics. Gliding. Understood, Red Dog 4. You are 8 miles out. Can you make the field? Dalton did the math one more time. Altitude 11,000 feet. Distance 8 miles. Descent rate 700 feet per minute. Time to reach field 3.3 minutes. Altitude loss in 3.3 minutes, 2,310 feet. Altitude at field 8,690 feet. He could make it if nothing else went wrong. Affirmative, he transmitted. I can make the field. Roger, Red Dog 4. Cleared to land. Godspeed. At Manston Tower, Pemberton watched through binoculars. The P-47 was visible now, 5 miles out, gliding. The propeller wasn't turning. Christ, the radar operator said. How is that thing still in the air? American engineering, Pemberton said, and one very lucky pilot. The crash crew was positioned along the runway. 3 fire trucks, 2 ambulances, a recovery vehicle. The P-47 descended steadily, 4 miles out. 3. Pemberton could see it clearly now. The aircraft looked like it had been through a shredder. How many holes? Dozens. maybe hundreds. 2 miles out. The P-47 was at 3,000 feet, lined up perfectly with the runway. 1 mile out. 1,000 feet altitude. Pemberton held his breath. The P-47 dropped below the tree line, disappeared for 5 seconds, then reappeared 200 feet above the runway threshold, 100 feet 50. The landing was brutal. No flaps, no hydraulics to extend them. The approach speed was 130 miles per hour when it should have been 90. The aircraft hit the runway hard, bounced 20 feet back into the air, came down again. The main gear held, barely. The P-47 rolled down the runway, decelerating slowly without brakes. 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet. At 4,000 feet, it finally stopped. The crash crew swarmed it. Sergeant Patrick O'Malley reached the cockpit first. He'd caught a ride from West Hampnet when he heard the Mayday call. The canopy was jammed. He climbed on the wing, looked inside. Dalton Mackenzie was slumped over the controls. Blood covered his face, his flight suit, the entire cockpit. "Get me a crowbar!" Patrick shouted. "Now!" 2 mechanics ran up with tools. They pried at the canopy. It took 5 minutes to get it open. They had to cut through metal. When the canopy finally came free, Patrick reached in, unbuckled the harness, pulled Dalton out. The pilot was conscious. Barely. His eyes were open, focused on nothing. "Easy, son. Easy. You're home. You made it home." Dalton tried to speak. Couldn't. His throat raw from breathing pure oxygen for 5 hours. The medics arrived with a stretcher. They lifted him carefully. The left leg was a mess. Blood everywhere. As they carried him to the ambulance, Dalton reached into his chest pocket, pulled out the letter, held it against his chest. Sarah's letter. 3 pages. Lavender ink. Still dry. Still safe. He'd brought it home. Patrick O'Malley stood beside the P-47 and stared. Technical Sergeant William Foster walked around the aircraft slowly, counting. He had a clipboard. After 20 minutes, he stopped. "How many?" Patrick asked. 218. Exactly. I counted twice to be sure. Cannon hits, 21. The rest machine gun. They walked around the aircraft together, documented the damage systematically. The engine nacelle was destroyed, the cowling completely gone. The cylinders visible, 3 of them cracked. The oil reservoir had a hole the size of a fist. The right wing had 14 holes. The left wing had 23. The ailerons were shredded but functional. The fuselage looked like a sieve. Holes everywhere. Some small, some large 20mm cannon shells that had exploded inside the structure. 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural spine of the aircraft, were shot through. The 4th was cracked but intact. The vertical stabilizer was mostly missing. The rudder was gone completely. Patrick reached into the cockpit, touched the armor plate behind the pilot's seat. It was dented, deformed, but not penetrated. A 20mm shell had hit it dead center. The armor had held. Behind the armor plate, the pilot had survived. "This shouldn't be possible," William said. "But it is." Patrick ran his hand along the damaged fuselage. "Republic built this thing to take punishment. They just didn't know how much until today." "Can you repair it?" Patrick laughed. "Repair it? This thing is going to sit in a hangar for 3 months while we rebuild it from the ground up. But yeah, we can repair it. Will the pilot fly it again? If he survives the hospital, yeah, I'd bet on it." At the base hospital, doctors worked on Dalton for 3 hours. The leg wound was clean. The bullet had passed through muscle, missed the bone, missed the major artery. They cleaned it, stitched it, wrapped it in gauze. He'd walk with a limp for a month. After that, normal. The facial lacerations were superficial. Glass cuts. They'd scar, but not badly. The doctors stitched 23 cuts. The blood loss was significant, but not critical. They gave him 2 pints. He'd need rest, food, time. When they finished, they moved him to a recovery room. Gave him morphine for the pain. He slept for 18 hours. When he woke, Major Collier Ashford was sitting beside the bed. "Welcome back," Ashford said. Dalton tried to speak. His throat was raw. He coughed. Ashford handed him water. He drank. "The aircraft?" Dalton asked. 218 bullet holes. Your crew chief counted twice. 3 longerons shot through. Engine destroyed. It's a miracle you made it home." "The German pilot, he saluted me." "I heard. Otto Brenner. We got his name from radio intercepts. 21 years old, 8 kills. He filed a report saying he expended all ammunition on a P-47 that refused to die." Dalton closed his eyes, saw the young German's face, the expression shifting from confidence to confusion to fear. "He could have rammed me. I was defenseless." "He didn't." Ashford leaned forward. "Because some men have honor even in war. Remember that." How long until I can fly again? 6 weeks, minimum. The doctors want 8. Your leg needs to heal. 6 weeks. Okay. Ashford stood. There's someone here to see you. I'll send her in. He left. Dalton's heart stopped. Sarah Whitley walked into the room. She was exactly as he remembered. Dark hair, smart eyes, 22 years old and beautiful in a way that made his chest hurt. She crossed the room in 3 steps, sat on the bed, took his hand. "You scared me," she said. Her voice was shaking. "I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just don't die. I'll try." She leaned down, kissed his forehead, his cheek, avoided the stitches. Her tears fell on his face. "They said you were shot over 200 times, that the aircraft should have fallen apart, that you flew it home anyway. The aircraft did the work. I just steered. The scars," she touched his face gently, "they make you look distinguished. I feel like a fool. You're my fool." She held his hand tight. "And you're coming home. After this war. After all of it. You're coming home to our farm. I promise." "Good." She kissed him again. "Now rest. I flew 6 hours on a military transport to get here. I'm not leaving until you're healed." Dalton closed his eyes, felt her hand in his, felt the morphine pulling him down into sleep. For the first time in months he felt safe. He felt the story of Dalton Mackenzie's survival spread through the fighter groups like wildfire. The unkillable farm boy, that's what they called him. The pilot who took 218 bullets and flew home anyway. Republic Aviation heard about it. Alexander Novak, the chief designer, flew to England to see the aircraft personally. He stood in the maintenance hangar at Manston and stared at the wreckage of his creation. 52 years old, Georgian immigrant. He'd designed the P-47 in 1940 when everyone said it was impossible. Too heavy, too complex, too expensive. Now he looked at what it had survived and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. "She brought him home," Novak said to Patrick O'Malley. "My baby brought him home." "That she did, sir." Novak walked around the aircraft slowly, touched the damaged metal, examined the structure. The longerons were shot through, but the load had redistributed to the remaining structure. The wing spars, over-engineered to carry 40,000 pounds of stress, had taken the excess load without failure. The armor plate, 3/8-inch steel, had stopped a 20mm shell that should have penetrated. The self-sealing fuel tanks had been punctured 19 times. All 19 punctures had sealed themselves. The R2800 engine had taken 37 direct hits and run for 5 more hours before seizing. Every redundant system had worked. Every over-engineered component had exceeded its design specifications. "They said I built it too heavy," Novak said. "Too strong, too expensive. They said it was wasteful." He pointed at the aircraft. "This is why, this moment, this pilot, this survival. You cannot predict what war will demand, so you build strong, you build redundant, you build to survive the impossible." Patrick nodded. "You built her right, sir. We all did. Every engineer, every worker. Every person who touched this aircraft. We all brought him home." Novak left England the next day, but he carried photographs of the damaged P-47. He showed them to every engineer at Republic, every worker on the assembly line. "This is what we're building," he told them. "Not just aircraft, life rafts with wings. We're saving pilots. Remember that with every rivet, every weld, every bolt." Production increased by 14% the next month. The workers knew what they were building now, and they built it better. By mid-July, the news reached Germany. German intelligence received Otto Brenner's combat report. Fired all cannon ammunition at close range. Observed multiple hits. Aircraft did not fall. Fired all machine gun ammunition. Observed more hits. Aircraft still flying. Assessment: American P-47 construction exceeds previous estimates. Recommend tactical revision. The report reached Oberst Josef Brandt, Chief of Luftwaffe Intelligence for the Western Front. Brandt was 54 years old. Career officer. He'd been analysing enemy aircraft since 1940. This was different. He called a meeting of Jagdgeschwader commanders, showed them the reports, the photographs of P-47s returning to base with severe damage. "Gentlemen," Brandt said, "we have underestimated the Americans." Victor von Steinhoff was at the meeting, still alive, still flying, but the confidence was fading. "With respect, Herr Oberst, one lucky aircraft does not change the tactical situation." "It's not one aircraft." Brandt laid out 15 reports, 15 different P-47s, all with catastrophic damage. All returned to base. One with 43 bullet holes, another with a missing vertical stabilizer, a third with 2 cylinders blown off the engine. All flew home. "The American fighter is built differently than ours," Brandt said. "They sacrifice performance for durability. At low altitude we maintain superiority, but at high altitude and in sustained combat they have an advantage we cannot counter." "What do you recommend?" someone asked. "Avoid engagement when possible. Attack bombers, not fighters. Force them to defend rather than attack. And pray that winter comes early." The meeting ended in silence. Victor returned to his quarters, wrote in his diary that night. "The Americans are learning. Their tactics improve weekly. The fat fighters are becoming dangerous. We mock them as flying milk bottles, but they survive what should kill them. How long until they master their advantage? How long until we cannot compete?" He didn't know the answer. None of them did. But 6 weeks later, when Dalton Mackenzie returned to flight status, the answer would begin to emerge. The milk bottles were about to become killing machines, and the sky over Europe would never be the same. August 17, 1943, 10:47 hours, 24,000 feet above Germany. Unteroffizier Heinz Vogel pressed his face against the rear gun sight of the Messerschmitt 110 and tried not to think about his mother. 19 years old, 7 combat missions. Before the war, he'd worked in his father's butcher shop in Hamburg, cutting meat, wrapping packages. Now he cut aircraft from the sky and wrapped bodies in parachute silk, when he could. "Fighters," his pilot Hauptmann Hans Werner transmitted. "Calm, professional, 22 kills in 3 years. 800 meters, 4 Thunderbolts, high dive!" Heinz swiveled the flexible 13mm machine gun, found the targets. 4 P-47s falling from 28,000 feet like anvils dropped from heaven. The new ones. Paddle blade propellers. The sound reached him even through the cockpit, a deep, threatening rumble. Donnerschlag. Thunder. He opened fire at 800 meters. The machine gun hammered. Tracer rounds arced upward. He saw strikes on the lead Thunderbolt's right wing. 3 hits, maybe 4. The P-47 didn't deviate, didn't wobble, just kept coming. Hans tried to turn the Me-110 into the attack. The twin-engine Zerstörer responded like a cargo truck trying to dodge a bullet. Slow, ponderous. The distance closed with mathematical precision. 600 meters, 500, 400. Heinz kept firing, saw more hits. The Thunderbolt's fuselage sparked where bullets struck. Still coming. 300 meters. The P-47's guns spoke. Heinz had grown up around loud noises, his father's meat saw. The pneumatic stunner for cattle. The grinder that processed hundreds of kilos daily. Nothing had prepared him for this sound. 8 50 caliber machine guns firing in perfect synchronization created a roar that transcended hearing. It was a physical force, a wall of noise and metal. 100 projectiles per second converged in a deadly pattern. The Me-110 entered that pattern. Heinz saw the wings separate first, just peeled away from the fuselage like paper tearing, then the tail. Clean separation at the rear bulkhead. The cockpit section began to disintegrate around them. He reached for the bailout handle. An armor-piercing incendiary round 1/2 inch in diameter entered through the cockpit. Glass passed through Heinz Vogel's chest cavity, severed his spine, tumbled, and exited through his lower back. The incendiary compound ignited at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit on exit. Heinz's last thought was incomplete, just the German word for mother. Mutt. Then nothing. Hans Werner survived another 1.3 seconds, long enough to see his gunner's body slump, long enough to understand that his aircraft no longer existed as a functional machine, not long enough to bail out. The Messerschmitt 110 fell as separate pieces toward the German countryside 23,000 feet below. In the lead, P-47. Dalton Mackenzie pulled out of the dive at 21,000 feet. 6 Gs. His vision greyed at the edges. The G-suit inflated. Vision cleared. He'd been flying combat for 4 months. 27 missions. 4 confirmed kills. The survival of the 218 bullet mission had made him famous. The unkillable farm boy. But legends didn't make you a better pilot. Training did. Experience did. Red 234. Target remaining bandits. Execute at will. His 3 wingmen, Lieutenant James Parker, Lieutenant Robert Clayton, Lieutenant Thomas Whitman, rolled into their attacks. All of them younger than Dalton. All of them alive because Dalton had taught them what Major Collier Ashford had taught him. Don't dogfight. Use altitude. Use speed. Use the guns. The remaining Mi-100s scattered like startled birds. Against diving P-47s, they were target practice. In 47 seconds, 7 more Mi-100s fell. The sky rained aluminum and bodies. Dalton felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just the cold mathematics of survival. 8 enemy aircraft that could have killed American bomber crews were now debris. He checked his formation. 4 P-47s, all intact, 0 damage. Reform on me, climb to escort altitude, mission continues. They climbed back to 28,000 feet. The B-17 formations continued toward Schweinfurt. The mission would be costly. The 8th Air Force would lose 60 bombers today. 600 men killed or captured, but it would have been worse without the P-47s. 150 miles away at Jagdgeschwader, 26 headquarters near Lille, Oberlieutenant Victor von Steinhoff listened to the radio reports and felt something he hadn't felt in 4 years of combat. Fear. Not the immediate fear of combat, the healthy fear that kept pilots alert. This was different, deeper. The existential fear of a man who sees the future and knows he's on the wrong side of history. The radio crackled. Zerstörer-Gruppe destroyed. Estimate 8 aircraft lost. No survivors observed. American fighters' new variant. Propeller sound distinctive. Climb rate exceeds previous estimates. Victor was 34 years old. 47 kills. He'd survived when better pilots died. Skill and luck in equal measure. But the Americans were evolving faster than the Luftwaffe could adapt. His wingman, Lieutenant Dieter Vogel, entered the office. 22 years old. 14 kills. Still young enough to believe they were winning. Herr Oberlieutenant. Orders for afternoon patrol. Victor turned from the window. No patrol today, Dieter. Maintenance issues. A lie. The aircraft were perfect. But Victor needed time to think, to plan, to find a way to fight an enemy that could climb higher, dive faster, absorb more damage and deliver overwhelming firepower. After Dieter left, Victor sat at his desk and opened his diary. August 17th, 1943. The Americans have new Thunderbolts. Improved propeller design. Climb rate now matches our best fighters. At high altitude, they dominate completely. Shot down 8 Zerstörers in less than 1 minute. Our pilots had no chance. We mocked them as flying milk bottles in April, called them fat, slow, helpless. We were wrong. They were learning, adapting. Now they're becoming the dominant predator in European skies. I fear we're fighting the last war while they're fighting the next one. And I fear I won't survive to see how this ends. He closed the diary, locked it in his desk drawer. 6 months later, Victor's fears would prove prophetic. But first, he had one more encounter with the Americans. February 14th, 1944. 26,000 feet above Hanover. Victor led 8 Focke-Wulf 19s toward a B-17 formation, standard intercept, attack from ahead, break up the formation. At 26,000 feet, he heard it. Thunder. Not the old P-47 sound. Deeper, more ominous. The paddle blade propellers creating shock waves that you felt before you heard them. The sound travelled through the airframe, through the seat, directly into your bones. Donnerschlag, Dieter transmitted, his voice tight. Controlled fear. 9 o'clock high. 4 Thunderbolts. Victor looked up through the canopy. 4 P-47 D-22S at 28,000 feet. Climbing. Still climbing. Impossible. The fat Americans couldn't climb. That was their weakness. Except these could. Victor watched the P-47s climb at 3,000 feet per minute. His Focke-Wulf maxed out at 2,400 feet per minute at this altitude couldn't match them. The Americans kept climbing. 29,000 feet. 30,000. 31,000. Far above the Focke-Wulf's effective combat ceiling. Then they rolled inverted. Dove. Victor had perhaps 3 seconds to react. Scatter break formation. Don't engage. Too late. The lead P-47 dove on Dieter. The young pilot tried to turn. The Focke-Wulf, sluggish at 26,000 feet, responded like a drunk man running. The Thunderbolt's guns spoke. Dieter's aircraft exploded, not just shot down, exploded. The fuel tanks ruptured, the ammunition detonated, the aircraft became a fireball that fell in burning pieces. No parachute, no chance. Victor dove for the deck, full throttle, emergency power. He pushed the nose down trading altitude for speed, 450 miles per hour, 480, 500. Behind him, 2 more Focke-Wulfs died. Schmidt's aircraft disintegrated under concentrated fire. Muller's lost a wing and tumbled out of control. Victor kept diving, didn't look back. Survival mattered more than honor now. He reached 8,000 feet before pulling out. The G-forces crushed him into the seat. 7 Gs. 8. His vision tunneled. Grey. Black at the edges. He eased back on the stick, checked his tail. Empty sky. The Thunderbolts had broken off, climbed back to escort altitude. They hadn't pursued, didn't need to. They'd made their point. Victor flew home alone. 3 aircraft from his formation of 8. The rest burning wreckage scattered across 50 miles of German countryside. That night he wrote in his diary, February 14th, 1944, Dieter is dead. Schmidt, Müller. The Americans have evolved beyond our ability to counter. The new Thunderbolts climb like fighters, dive like meteors, and kill with industrial precision. We cannot fight them at high altitude, cannot run from them in a dive, cannot survive their guns if they get firing solution. I don't know how much longer I can do this. Every mission now feels like Russian roulette with 5 chambers loaded. God help us all.
6 months later, August 24th, 1944. Victor von Steinhoff's luck ran out. Over Paris, at 24,000 feet, his Focke-Wulf 190 was caught by 4 P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group. He tried to dive away. The Americans followed him down, matching his speed, maintaining firing position. At 8,000 feet, running out of altitude and options, Victor pulled up hard, tried to reverse the engagement. The lead P-47 pilot, a captain from New Jersey, fired a 3-second burst. Victor's aircraft came apart. He bailed out at 6,000 feet, but his parachute failed to deploy properly. The risers were tangled. He fell 6,000 feet in 40 seconds. The man who had mocked the P-47 as a flying milk bottle died on impact in a French wheat field. He was 35 years old. 47 confirmed victories. One of the Luftwaffe's most experienced pilots. The war continued without him.
June 6th, 1944. 0530 hours. Over Omaha Beach. Dalton McKenzie led 24 P-47s in a racetrack pattern at 15,000 feet. Part of the largest aerial armada ever assembled. 500 P-47s total, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the invasion beaches, stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. Rotating combat air patrol, 4-hour shifts. The Luftwaffe tried. At 6:15, 12 Focke-Wulf 19s from Jagdgeschwader 2 attempted to break through and strafe the beaches. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer led them. 26 years old, 15 victories. He knew it was suicide, but orders were orders. They tried to penetrate at 8,000 feet. Dalton's formation was waiting. Wolfgang pushed his Focke-Wulf to maximum speed, 380 miles per hour, racing toward the beach. If he could reach the landing craft, cause chaos, kill Americans, it might be worth it. He never made it. The sky above the beach belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts everywhere. Stacked in layers, waiting, watching. 4 P-47s rolled in from above, diving at 480 miles per hour. Too fast to evade, too many to fight. Wolfgang saw the lead P-47's guns light up. Muzzle flashes, tracer rounds walking toward him. He pulled hard right. 4 Gs, 5. The Focke-Wulf shuddered under the strain. Not enough. The .50 caliber rounds walked across his left wing, through the cockpit, through the engine. Everything happened fast. Engine seized, controls dead. Aircraft rolling inverted. Wolfgang pulled the canopy release. It worked. Thank God it worked. He unbuckled, kicked away from the dying aircraft, pulled the ripcord. The parachute deployed. He looked up, white silk against blue sky. Around him, the sky rained burning aircraft. 11 Focke-Wulfs down. He was the only survivor. Below, the invasion continued. Thousands of ships, thousands of men. The liberation of Europe. Wolfgang landed in the Channel, cold, alone. Picked up by a British patrol boat 30 minutes later, he spent the rest of the war in a POW camp in Scotland. Years later, in a 1972 interview, he described D-Day. The sky belonged to them, thunderbolts everywhere, stacked from the water to the clouds. We tried to break through at dawn, 12 of us. I was the only one to return. He paused, looked at the interviewer. You can't climb over them, can't dive under them. Their guns turn aircraft into aluminum rain. It's not a battle. It's execution. The months after D-Day were systematic destruction. The 9th Air Force P-47 groups flew interdiction missions daily, destroying German logistics, killing the Wehrmacht's ability to move in daylight. The statistics from June alone were staggering. 651 locomotives destroyed, 3,847 trucks destroyed, 512 tanks and armored vehicles destroyed, 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The German army was forced to move only at night. Dalton flew ground attack missions throughout July and August. The P-47D-25 could carry 2 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder under the fuselage, plus rockets, plus the guns. The transformation from air superiority fighter to fighter bomber was complete. On a mission near Amiens on August 3rd, Dalton's flight destroyed a German supply convoy. 20 trucks. 1 fuel tanker. Oberst Hans von Beck watched his convoy die from a roadside ditch. 45 years old. Commander of the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment. He'd fought in Poland, France, Russia. He'd never seen anything like this. "They came in so low I could see the pilot's goggles," he told his staff that evening. "The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring. Then those guns." He gestured at the burning wrecks. 20 vehicles, gone in one pass. These aren't jabos. This is flying artillery with sniper accuracy." His operations officer asked the obvious question. "How do we defend against them?" Von Beck didn't have an answer. Nobody did. January 1st, 1945. 800 hours. Operation Bodenplatte. The Luftwaffe's last desperate attempt to destroy Allied air power. 900 German fighters launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 airfield near Metz, home of the 365th Fighter Group, the attack initially succeeded. 22 P-47s destroyed on the ground, several other aircraft damaged. A captured German pilot was brought to the command post, Lieutenant Erich Adler, 18 years old, shot down by anti-aircraft fire. Major George Brooks, the group commander, 40 years old, looked at the burning P-47s on the flight line. Eric smirked, cocky despite being captured. "What do you think of that, American?" Brooks pointed at the flight line. Ground crews were already pushing damaged aircraft aside, clearing hard stands. "By tomorrow morning, we'll have 40 new ones flying from this field. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" Eric's smirk disappeared. He understood. Finally understood what Germany was fighting. Not just aircraft, not just pilots. Industrial might beyond comprehension. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40S arrived from depots in England. 40 aircraft to replace 22 destroyed. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft in Operation Bodenplatte. More critically, they lost 213 pilots. Many were irreplaceable instructors. Squadron leaders. These losses Germany could never replace. The Americans replaced their losses in 2 days. March 15th, 1945. 28,000 feet above Munich. Dalton had 27 confirmed kills, ace status, his name on the squadron board beside the legends. He spotted the Messerschmitt 262 jet fighter at 24,000 feet, 540 miles per hour top speed, untouchable by propeller-driven fighters in level flight, except in 2 situations, takeoff and landing, and high-altitude dives. Dalton was at 28,000 feet. The Me-262 was 4,000 feet below. The jet pilot was confident, relaxed, hunting bombers. Dalton rolled inverted. Dove. The paddle blade P-47D-30 accelerated. 400 miles per hour. 450. 480. 500. At 500 miles per hour in a dive, he was fast enough to close the gap. The Me-262 pilot, Oberleutnant Werner Hoffmann, 28 years old, 12 victories, never saw the attack. Focused forward, hunting bombers. Dalton opened fire at 400 yards. The Me-262 disintegrated. Both engines separated from the fuselage. The cockpit section shredded. Werner had no time to react, no chance to bail out. Dead before he knew he was in danger. Dalton pulled up, climbed back to altitude. "Even jets can't escape the thunder," he said quietly. His last kill. His last mission was April 20th, 1945. A routine patrol over Germany. No enemy contact. The Luftwaffe was finished. The war in Europe ended 18 days later. Dalton had flown 89 combat missions, 27 confirmed kills, shot down 0 times after June 26, 1943. He'd survived. June 1946. Dalton and Sarah returned to Oklahoma. The farm was exactly as he remembered. The same fields, the same barn, the same porch swing. He was 27 years old. She was 25. They had their entire lives ahead of them. They married in a small ceremony. Her father gave her away. Dalton's parents were there. Collier Ashford flew out from California to be best man. They had 3 children. Elizabeth born 1948, Thomas born 1950, James born 1953. 7 grandchildren eventually. Dalton never flew again, never talked about the war. When people asked about his medals, Distinguished Service Cross Silver Star, 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses, he changed the subject. When his daughter Elizabeth asked about the scars on his face, he said, "I got into some trouble once, it worked out okay." When reporters tried to interview him about being the unkillable farm boy, he declined politely.
I just did my job, he said.
Same as everyone else. He lived quietly, farmed wheat, raised his children. A good life, a quiet life. The life he'd promised Sarah he'd come home to. September 1985, Phoenix, Arizona. The fighter pilots' reunion brought together men who'd tried to kill each other 40 years before. Dalton was 66 years old, grey hair, the scars on his face barely visible now. He walked with a slight limp on humid days. Legacy of the leg wound. Sarah was 64, still beautiful, still the smartest person in any room. They walked into the hotel conference room together. Across the room, Dalton saw a face he recognized. Otto Brenner, 63 years old, retired engineer from Leipzig. He'd survived the war, spent 3 years in a Soviet POW camp. Come home, rebuilt his life, built bridges for 40 years, the career he'd dreamed of before the war. They stared at each other across 40 years. Sarah felt Dalton's hand tighten on hers. That's him, Dalton said quietly. The one who spared me. Otto walked over, extended his hand. Dalton Mackenzie. Yes. I tried to kill you. June 26, 1943. I remember. They shook hands, both men with tears in their eyes. I emptied all my ammunition into your aircraft, Otto said. You should have died. The aircraft should have fallen apart, but it kept flying. You kept flying. You could have rammed me. I was defenseless. I could not. You had earned something. Respect. Honor. I do not know the word, but I could not murder a defenseless man. They sat together, talked for 3 hours. General Adolf Steiner, 73 years old, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, joined them. The P-47 Thunderbolt, Adolf said, was the weapon that defeated us, not because it was the fastest, not because it was the most maneuverable, but because it combined firepower durability and industrial production beyond our ability to counter. He looked at Dalton. You were the proof. 218 bullets. You survived. You showed every American pilot that the P-47 could take punishment and bring them home. That changed everything. Dalton shook his head. I was just lucky. No, Adolf said firmly. You were the right pilot in the right aircraft at the right moment. You proved what American engineering could achieve. After you survived, every P-47 pilot knew they could survive too. Morale increased, tactics improved, and we lost. Later that evening, Otto introduced Dalton to another German pilot, Hauptmann Ernst Schroeder, 69 years old. He'd flown Victor von Steinhoff's yellow-nosed Focke-Wulf in 1944, tried to kill Dalton over Munich, failed, spent the rest of the war in a POW camp. I remember you, Dalton said. You flew Victor's aircraft. Ernst nodded. He was my teacher, my mentor, like a father. When he died, I wanted revenge. I saluted you when you bailed out. I remember. I didn't understand why. We'd just tried to kill each other, but you saluted me like we were honorable men doing our duty. We were, Dalton said. Both of us. Ernst smiled. Sad, but genuine. I wrote you a letter in 1946. Asked if we could meet someday. I got it. I didn't know how to respond. You're here now. That's enough. The three men, Dalton, Otto, Ernst, stood together. Former enemies, now friends. The kind of friendship only possible between men who've tried to kill each other and failed. November 2001. Dalton Mackenzie died on his farm in Oklahoma. 82 years old. Heart failure. Peaceful. Sarah beside him. You came home, my dearest, she whispered. You kept your promise. I did, he said. I did. His funeral was attended by 400 people. 3 P-47 Thunderbolts flew overhead in missing man formation. Sarah touched the wing of the restored P-47 at the museum afterward. This beast brought him back to me, she said, 58 years ago. Brought him home through 218 bullets and 87 miles of sky. Thank you. Thank you for bringing him home. The others came too. Otto Brenner returned to Leipzig, built bridges for 40 years. Died in 2004, age 82, 3 years after Dalton. His family found a photograph in his desk drawer. Dalton and Otto shaking hands in Phoenix, 1985. Whitaker Beaumont survived Stalag Luft 3, returned to Georgia, never flew again. He visited Dalton's farm once in 1967. They sat on the porch swing, didn't talk about the war, just watched the sunset. That was enough. He died in 1998, 74 years old. Thaddeus Brennan, became chief engineer at Republic Aviation, retired 1978. He kept a piece of Dalton's 218-hole P-47 in his office, the armor plate that had stopped a 20mm shell. Proof, he'd say, that we built them right. He died in 1992, 73 years old. Collier Ashford made colonel, retired 1965. He attended Dalton's funeral, stood at attention as the P-47s flew overhead, saluted one last time. He was the proof, Collier said. The proof that we could survive anything. He died in 2006, 91 years old. Ernst Schroeder lived in Munich, became a teacher, taught history, told his students about honor in war, about the American pilot who saluted him when he could have killed him. He died in 2009, 84 years old. Patrick O'Malley stayed in the Air Force, made Master Sergeant, retired 1968. He kept a photograph of Dalton's damaged P-47 in his workshop. Died in 1987, 87 years old. Sarah Whitley. Mackenzie lived another 18 years. Died in 2019 at age 98, surrounded by 7 grandchildren, 15 great-grandchildren. At the museum, her great-granddaughter, age 7, asked about the P-47. Why is this one special? Sarah, 96 years old, then clear-eyed, took the girl's hand. Because this beast brought your great-grandfather home, through 218 bullet holes and 87 miles of sky. It brought him home to me. She touched the propeller blade, the paddle blade that had made thunder. And because of that, you're here. All of us are here. The little girl looked up at the massive aircraft. It's beautiful. Yes, Sarah said. It is. She died 3 years later. Her last words to her family, tell them he kept his promise. Tell them he came home. At the National Museum of World War II Aviation, a placard beside a restored P-47D reads, Lieutenant Dalton Mackenzie survived 218 bullet hits on June 26, 1943, proving the P-47 Thunderbolt's legendary durability. His survival changed American fighter tactics and pilot morale. 27 victories, 89 missions, Distinguished Service Cross. When asked about his achievements, he said simply, I was just a farm boy who got lucky. The real hero was the beast that wouldn't die and the woman who waited for me. Below the placard, a photograph. Dalton and Sarah on their Oklahoma farm, 1946. Young, alive, home. The thunder had faded, but the promise remained. And love proved stronger than war. The Germans had laughed at the P-47 in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken, and the sky belonged to America.